With this weekend being Glastonbury and last month being Coachella, I thought that it might be a good time to compare the two arguably biggest and most talked about music festivals in the world. Whether it's either the slipping in mud or getting covered in dust, and in this video we're going to compare them both, the good and the bad. So here it is, Coachella versus Glastonbury, and the differences between them both. After seeing an outdoor open-air concert in 1970 at the Bath & West Showground that Led Zeppelin was headlining, Michael Eavis, the founder of Glastonbury, decided he wanted to have a go at organising his own festival on his own farm. The story of Coachella's founding is a lot different and starts with a Pearl Jam performance 23 years after the first Glastonbury. A man by the name of Paul Tollett, who runs a company called Golden Voice, which does concert promotion. He was tasked with booking a venue for Pearl Jam, who, thanks to a dispute with Ticketmaster, refused to perform in Los Angeles. The Empire Polo Club in Indio, California was selected, with it being 2 hours away from Los Angeles. Several years later, after struggling to book bigger acts and losing them to their competition, it was decided that they should try a festival, and what better place to have it than that plot of land they had used for the Pearl Jam gig. And in 1999, the first Coachella began. Even before we looked at Empire Polo Club, it hit us. We wanted it to be far, so you'd surrender, so you can't leave your house and see a couple bands and be back home that night. We want you to go out there, get tired, and curse the show by Sunday afternoon. That sunset and that whole feeling of Coachella hits you, said Paul Tollett. Now, with Glastonbury starting a whopping 29 years before Coachella, it's no surprise that Glastonbury has had more events than that of Coachella, but due to Glastonbury being held on an active farm, they need to have a fallow year, where they take a year off once every 4 years, so the ground doesn't get too destroyed. This means that even despite Glastonbury starting 29 years before Coachella, eventually Coachella will take over the amount of festivals they have had. Now, it's not all good. Some of the reasons why having a festival in a muddy farmer's field or a bit of dusty desert out in California is a bad idea is due to the lack of obvious infrastructure that there is in these locations. Luckily for both of these festivals, their size and professional scale of them now negate a lot of these problems. However, both a desert in California and a field in England are still at the mercy of the weather. Mud is a big one for Glastonbury, as just a bit of rain can cause havoc in the fields. In fact, when originally marketing Coachella to talent managers, Paul Tollett in 1997 was at Glastonbury and was handing out leaflets to those at the event in hopes of getting them and their teams to perform at his Coachella, one that was sure to be a whole lot less muddy. He had this pamphlet showing sunny Coachella. Everyone was laughing, said Paul Tollett. In fact, in 2005 the festival was delayed due to last-minute flash floods and lightning that had caused damage to a few of the stages. This is always particularly an issue at the base of Panhead Hill, where the water can congregate. In some places that year the water got to be more than 4 foot in height. The flooding of 2005 led to changes. For the 2007 year, however, the £750,000 spent on new flood defences were hardly enough, and thanks to more rain, that meant conditions were arguably the worst they had ever been in recent years. However, whilst all the issues caused by rain may seem to be bad, you could easily argue that the desert setting of Coachella could probably do with at least some rain, as in 2019 it was reported by the Daily Beast that there was, quote, inhumane treatment of the festival security staff who have had to deal with poor conditions, lack of sufficient food and water facilities, as well as being paid minimum wage to stand in the sun for hours on end. Whilst the weather may affect attendees, the attendees of these festivals always seem to affect the locals. Having thousands of people attend these places that are relatively quiet for the rest of the year can cause havoc when it comes to the people that live nearby. In fact, in the 1992 documentary produced by Channel 4 called Showdown at Glastonbury, we can see the battles that Michael Eavis has with local residents. However, weather and local residents are not the only things that can cause havoc for these festivals, as in both 2020 and 2021, Coachella Festival was cancelled due to COVID-19. Likewise, both the 2020 and 2021 editions of the Glastonbury Festival were cancelled. This was especially significant because the 2020 edition of Glastonbury would have been the 50th. In 2021, a film called Live at Worthley Farm was filmed, and broadcasted instead. The prices of both festivals have changed throughout the years. Well, one of the most interesting aspects of the festival, that being its price. The first edition of the festival happened in 1970, where the ticket price was just £1. Even adjusted for inflation from 1970, that would still only cost £13.74 today. And by 1979, the price had only gone up to £5 and would continue to rise every year. In fact, from Glastonbury beginning, it took 33 years for ticket prices to reach over £100 in 2003. However, it would only take 10 more years for the price to double that, reaching £205 for the 2013 edition. The biggest price increase that would happen in a single year was between 2008 and 2009, where ticket prices went up by £20 and would continue to be increased by an average of £10 each year for the next 5 Glastonburys. The cheapest Glastonbury tickets in recent years was £20 for the 38th festival. However, taking place during 2021 meant that it had to be watched online. If you were to have gone to every version of Glastonbury, it would have cost you a total of £3,936, over half of which would have been made up by just going to the 10 most recent editions of the festival. Of course, starting much later, the price of Coachella started at $50 for each day, and now costs $599 for just general admission. When it comes to where you can watch the festival, when not there in person, it of course varies from country to country. In the case of Glastonbury, it first got its full TV broadcast of the festival in the UK in 1994, 24 years after the festival originally began. Yet still 5 full years before Coachella would even be a thing. Having these big TV broadcasts go a long way in getting so-called bigger and better artists to perform at the festival each year. In the case of Coachella TV rights, however, they have actually had a deal with YouTube since 2011, of all people, to show exclusive live streams from the festival here on YouTube. Outside of TV, both festivals make their presence shown as being the locations for films, both as stand-ins for fictional festivals, as well as being both Glastonbury and Coachella when needed for the story. And to end the video, which festival makes the most money each year? Well, in 2017, Coachella brought in a profit of $114 million, whilst last year's Glastonbury made $5.9 million in profits from just $6.4 million for that year's total revenue. But with this year's edition selling out in just 35 minutes, I don't think that they'll care. Thanks for watching.